Howdy again everyone, and today we're checking out the brand new Nikon Z 50mm f1.4. Always welcome to see a new official f1.4 hitting the market. It's a full frame lens only for Nikon Z mount mirrorless cameras, and I'd like to thank Nikon UK for loaning me this lens for a couple of weeks for evaluation, although as usual this is a totally independent review and they've had no input at all into this video. The first feature of this lens to speak of that really jumps out to me is its price, only $500 US or £500 here in the UK. Nowadays, for a brand new, bright aperture, autofocus, full frame 50mm lens, that's a relative bargain. Even Nikon's own 50mm f1.8S model is $100 more expensive, despite having a maximum aperture 66% darker. So it'll be interesting to see what compromises they've made in order to get its price as low as this, considering its very bright aperture. Even if the lens has optical compromises, at this price it's still an attractive proposition because a 50mm f1.4 on full frame is very highly desirable, offering you quite a natural perspective with a field of view that's neither wide angle nor telephoto, and gives you a very nice little emphasis on your subject. Nice to see Nikon's customers getting some real choice here. The lens itself does have a slightly lower budget feel to it, as you'd expect. It's mostly made of plastic with a slightly rougher textured finish than Nikon's more expensive options, but it feels solid enough, being based on a metal lens mount with weather sealing. Nikon claim it to be dust and moisture resistant. You don't get an auto manual focus switch here, but we do get one of Nikon's customizable control rings at the rear. It turns smoothly and it's set to control your aperture by default, but it can also be set in your camera to control ISO or exposure compensation, or even deactivated completely, which is actually what I normally do with those things because I find it too easy to accidentally turn them. Curiously, this is something omitted from Nikon's more expensive 50mm f1.8S lens. Then comes a broad, rubberized manual focus ring. It turns smoothly and the focus motor responds to it being turned quite well, if a little slowly, and also the lens doesn't display much focus breathing here, which is useful for video makers. The lens's autofocus system works at only an average speed, it's no speed demon, and it emits a very quiet whirring sound as it goes along, but that's quite enough to only realistically be audible when recording video with a camera's onboard microphone. It works accurately too. The lens has a 62mm filter size and comes with a handy but pretty simple plastic lens hood. It does not have its own image stabilization, but a lot of Nikon's latest cameras do at least have that built in nowadays. All in all, the build quality is absolutely fine here, considering the price that you're paying. It doesn't have the fastest autofocus in the world, but at least its focus breathing is impressively under control. It's remarkably similar to Nikon's also new 35mm f1.4. Alright then, image quality. I'll be testing this thing on a Nikon Z7 with its full frame 45MP sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. At f1.4 in the middle of the image we see decent sharpness, but contrast is just okay. We also get a touch of purple colour fringing on contrasting edges, but nothing too serious. Over in the corners some sharpness is still there, but it looks a little washed over by low contrast. At f2 we see more sharpness, contrast and brightness, although the corners aren't yet completely sharp. Back in the middle, I'm glad to say, we're now seeing excellent sharpness, good contrast and no more purple fringing. Stop down to f2.8 for sharpness to become perfect in the middle though, and the corners, they look fantastic now too. They stay this sharp down to f8. However, at f11 and f16, softness begins to creep in due to diffraction. Overall though, for the price you're paying here, it's a good enough performance. It's sharp enough at f1.4, a little punchier at f2, and excellent from f2.8, and for a 500 quid official f1.4 lens, that's about right. It's a decent enough show. Alright, let's turn off in-camera corrections and take a look at distortion and vignetting. The lens projects just a minuscule touch of barrel distortion here, nothing you'll ever notice. Vignetting is heavy at f1.4 though. Stop down to f2 or f2.8 and those corners begin to brighten up, although even at f4 the brightness is never completely even, so you should definitely make sure that vignetting gets corrected one way or the other. Let's check out this lens's close-up image quality. It can focus down to about 36 centimeters, which is fairly useful. At f1.4 we see a very murky image here, low sharpness and plenty of colour fringing. At f2 the image is a little better defined, but it's at f2.8 that we see excellent sharpness again, so if you shoot close, stop down. Let's see how the lens performs against bright lights now. As you can see, it's a good enough performance. There's some haze around the light source itself, but only very gentle flaring. And while we're working in the dark, let's take a look for coma and sun stars. At f1.4, coma levels are very high, unfortunately, especially for a modern lens. I could tell this might be the case from looking at the sharpness results. There are small improvements as you top down to f2 and f2.8, but at f4 that coma is finally gone. Let's move the camera a little and look for sun stars then. They begin to emerge at f5.6, getting more defined at f8 and f11, and finally at f16 they look frankly incredible. Next, bokeh. The lens's out-of-focus backgrounds are a little edgy, to be honest. Not bad, but a little nervous, and specular highlights suffer from a touch of outlining. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. Whoa, it's a real problem at f1.4, as you can see. It's still there at f2, f2.8 and even f4, but finally at f5.6 it's gone. Overall, I'm fascinated with Nikon's decision to market a lens like this, as well as its recent 35mm f1.4 brother, although this 50mm lens is the better optic of the two. It's a lens with compromises, as you've seen, but also a suitably low price, which makes it attractive, especially considering the striking images it can get you, and it's decently sharp as well. Anyone who's holding out for a super professional 50mm f1.4 lens will be disappointed here, of course, but I'm not really. I wish more manufacturers would offer such a choice in their lower budget lens ecosystem, and this will be a useful lens for 4K video work also. It will also feel happier on a 24 megapixel camera, where resolution demands aren't quite as high. Considering the lens's affordable price though, it's certainly the kind of thing I personally wouldn't mind having in my kit bag, and it does still come recommended. Honestly, even when they're not the sharpest in the world, I still really love those 50mm f1.4 lenses. I love the images they make. Hope you found that review helpful, everyone, and if you regularly watch them, then check out my Patreon page in the description down below. There, you'll find all kinds of bonus content for supporters, as well as early access to lots of reviews. Ciao for now, everyone.